No, you're not seeing double. Two pulpits where there was only one last week. Hi, I'm Annie Furster, minister at First Jefferson Unitarian Universalist Church in Fort Worth, Texas. Welcome. We have a guest speaker this week, and I'm happy to be sharing the chancel with him. Dan, will you take your place at the main pulpit? Let me introduce Dan Levine, a member of our church since 1983, professor of psychology at the University of Texas in Arlington, and author of the new book, Healing the Reason-Emotion Split, Scarecrows, Tin Woodman, and the Wizard. Welcome, Dan.
Thank you, Annie. I'm delighted to be here. It's not the first time I've spoken from this pulpit, but it's been a long time.
And we often see you over there by the piano as one of our lead singers during the lockdown when we don't have congregational singing.
Yes, several of the choir members have been doing that. And speaking of choir, I'm so happy we've started rehearsing again.
Yeah.
What is it, just 2 more weeks till we open the doors?
More weeks, just right. In 3 weeks, if all goes well, until we get to hear the new choir and meet our new choir director, Michael Newen.
I'm looking forward to it.
I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say this morning. In worship this morning with the music of Mirko Birkin's intro in G major from our pianist, Misha Beresnev. Our call to worship this morning was written by Ma Teresa, also known as Tet Gustillo Gallardo. Here is my temple. Believer, unbeliever, or wild one, you are welcome. We have no definition of who we are, but human. We have no code, but that of respect. We have no creed, but that of equality. Here's my temple. Identity seeker, sinner, stateless or not, you are welcome. We have no constraints on expression, but space. We have no code, but to listen to poetry between the silence and the surrender. Here's my temple, nature tripper, urban dweller, or saint. You are welcome. How shall we divide the world except by our breaths? We have no authority above us, no infallible director. We have no judgment, but in terms of harm. Here's my temple, history maker, marginalized, unorganized. You are welcome. We have a covenant among us of mutual assistance. We are free to theorize with emotion and call it hope. We are free to use our reason and call it part of the process. Here's my temple. Funny, temperamental, shy, or wise, you are welcome. There's not one way of being human. We have no world but that in which we create together. There is much wisdom in harmony as in dissent. A chalice lit in our midst is a symbol of our liberal faith, a faith built on the foundation of freedom, reason, and tolerance, a faith sustained by acts of kindness and justice. It visions a world flourishing with equality for all her people, a faith that demands the living out of goodness, a faith that requires thoughtfulness, a faith that demands feeling, faith of wholeness. This tiny flame, symbol of the spark of all this within each of us. Please join us in singing our opening hymn, number 194, Faith is a Forest. Our hymn leader this morning is Della Purden.
Faith is a forest in which doubts play and hide. Insights can hear the still small voice deep inside. Web of life, may this thread I weave strengthen commitment in all I believe. Vision be my guide as I seek my way. Lead me into this tender day. Speak through me in all I do and say. Seeds of both meek and strong are scattered in air. Dignity shines undimmed by bigotry's glare. Web of life, may this thread I weave. Strength me bear witness to all I believe. Justice be my guide as I seek my way. Lead me into this tender day. Speak through me in all I do and say. Fortune and famine ride the swift winds of chance. Sorrow and pleasure seem united in dance. Web of life, may this thread I weave mingle compassion with all I believe. Mercy be my guide as I seek my way. Lead me into this tender day. Speak through me in all I do and say.
If you thought that you if you thought you were in China when you were singing that song, you weren't far wrong. Shelley Jackson Denham, a Unitarian Universalist songwriter, put those words to an old Chinese folk song that was adapted by Ito Lo in 1936. I love the diversity of things that happen in this congregation. Please join me now in saying our affirmation. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is our sacrament, and service is our prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve others in community to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with creation. Thus do we covenant with one another. Every morning we ask a question, and Dan has a question for you today.
First question, have you ever felt guilty because you were acting on emotion more than on thoughtful deliberation? Does emotion interfere with the best uses of our minds?
Interesting question, Stan, but while we're thinking about it, let's listen to a story for all ages. This one actually is about the Tin Woodman and Scarecrows, and it comes from the wonderful Wizard of Oz, written by L. Frank Baum. The Scarecrow said to his friends, "Congratulate me. I'm going to Oz to get my brains at last, and when I return I shall be as other men are. Surely you will think more of me when you hear the splendid thoughts my new brain is going to turn out." Then he said goodbye to them all and went to the throne room. He went in and found a little man sitting by the window, engaged in deep thought. "I have come for my brains," remarked the Scarecrow, a little uneasily. "Sit down in that chair, please," replied Oz. "You must excuse me for taking your head off, but I shall have to do it in order to put your brains in their proper place." The wizard unfastened his head and emptied out the straw. Then he took up a measure of bran, which he mixed with a great many pins and needles. Having shaken them all together thoroughly, he filled the top of the Scarecrow's head with the mixture and stuffed the rest of the space with straw to hold it in place. And when he had fastened the Scarecrow's head on his body again, he said to him, "Hereafter you will be a great man, for I have given you a lot of brand new brains." Oh. The Scarecrow was both pleased and proud at the fulfillment of his greatest wish, and having thanked Oz warmly, he went back to his friends. Dorothy looked at him curiously. His head was quite bulged out at the top with brains. "How do you feel?" she asked. "Oh, I feel wise indeed," he answered earnestly, "and when I get used to my brains, I shall know everything." "Well, I must go to Oz and get my heart," said the woodman. So he walked to the throne room, entered, and said, "I have come for my heart." "Very well," answered the little man, "but I shall have to cut a hole in your breast so I can put your heart in the right place." Oz brought a pair of tinsmith's shears and cut a small square hole on the left side of the Tin Woodman's breast. Then going to a chest of drawers, he took out a pretty heart made entirely of silk and stuffed with sawdust. "Is it a kind heart?" asked the Tin Woodman. "Oh, very," answered Oz. He put the heart in the woodman's breast and then replaced the square of tin, soldering it in neatly together where it had been cut. "There," he said, "now you have a heart that any man might be proud of." "I'm very grateful to you, and I shall never forget your kindness," said the Tin Woodman. Then the Tin Woodman went back to his friends, who wished him every joy on account of his good fortune. The lion now walked to the throne room and entered. "I've come for my courage," announced the lion, entering the room. "Very well," answered the little man, "I will get it for you." He went to a cupboard and, reaching up high on the shelf, took down a square green bottle, the contents of which he poured into a green gold dish, beautifully carved. And placing this before the cowardly lion, who sniffed at it as if he did not like it, the wizard said, "Drink." "What is it?" asked the lion. "Well," answered Oz, "if it were inside of you, it would be courage. You know, of course, that courage is always inside one, so that this really cannot be called courage until you have swallowed it. Therefore, I advise you to drink it as soon as possible." The lion hesitated no longer, but drank till the dish was empty. "How do you feel now?" asked Oz. "Oh, full of courage," replied the lion, who went joyfully back to his friends to tell them of his good fortune. Oz, left to himself, smiled to think of his success in giving the Scarecrow and the Tin Woodman and the lion exactly what they thought they wanted. "How can I help being a humbug," he said, "when all these people make me do things that everybody knows can't be done? It was easy to make the Scarecrow and the lion and the Woodman happy because they imagined I could do anything. But it will take more than imagination to carry Dorothy back to Kansas. And I'm sure I don't know how it can be done." And of course, we all know, if we've read the story, that it was done. And now we're about to get another point of view on brains, heart, and yes, even courage. Dan?
Let me tell you about an emotional choice I made long ago when I was just finishing college. Back then, I was a math major and had to decide between several offers of graduate assistantships in mathematics from schools that were comparable in money and prestige, and had several months to make my decision. Finally, I had narrowed it down to Columbia University or the University of Chicago. Columbia was slightly better in terms of faculty interested in what was then my area of math. But I visited Chicago, and it brought me back to the neighborhood where I had grown up but moved away from with my parents when I was 14. It was my first visit to the old hood in several years. The sights gave me nostalgia, and I just wanted to get back there. So I chose to go to Chicago. As it turned out, I only stayed in Chicago 1 year, because the Vietnam War draft forced a change in my plans. But that episode, and knowing that my own choices are not all based on weighing pros and cons, but incorporate gut feelings, influenced my current professional interest in the psychology of human decision-making. So the emotional choice of a graduate school worked out fine for me. As a young man growing up in the 1960s and 1970s, I felt dissatisfied with the culture's expectations of masculinity. That was the period of the women's liberation movement, and a small and often neglected offshoot was the men's liberation movement. My male friends and I began to resist the pressure to be totally devoted to our work, to be strong and silent and not show emotion. We actually found we could perform our work better if we liberate ourselves to get our feelings out of the closet and ask for mutual support when needed, even hug each other at times. In common speech, we often talk as if emotion were the enemy of reason. Yes, if we get too wrought up in our reactions to an unfortunate event, it can cloud our judgment by making us overly depressed or angry. And if we get deliriously happy in our reactions to a fortunate event, it can also cloud our judgment by making us believe everything will be fine no matter what we do. Yet we need ongoing, longer-term emotions, both positive and negative, to make good decisions. The first reading is from my own 2021 book. Consider the common use in American English of phrases like, "she acted on emotion," or "his decision was emotionally based." These phrases are typically used to describe, for example, a person committing a crime of passion, someone falling in love with a partner who is charming but abusive, or a voter who votes for a candidate who is charismatic but dishonest. They are not used for someone who supports his or her family out of the emotion of love, or for someone who works steadily on a job out of passion for her or his work. So these phrases reinforce the unconscious biases behind the reason-emotion split, with reason superior to emotion, which pervades Western culture. The split is also reinforced by the dilemma we sometimes feel. Should I act on reason or emotion? The answer is usually both. We need emotion to feel the importance of doing something, and we need reason to carry it out effectively. So the question poses a false choice. Asking, should I act on reason or emotion, makes no more sense than asking, should I drive with my hands or with my So the answers to the first question is, don't feel guilty for being emotional, because it doesn't interfere with our best mental function. Now let us sing the first hymn, number 298, Wake Now My Senses. We are singing only the first 3 verses.
Wake now my senses and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in all. Keep with the web of creation your vow. Giving, receiving as love shows us how. Wake now my reason, reach out for the new. Join with each pilgrim whose quest for the true. Honor the beauty and wisdom of time. Suffer thy limit and praise the sublime. Wake now, compassion, give heed to the cry. Voices of suffering fill the wide sky. Take as your neighbor both stranger and friend, praying and striving their hardship to end.
My generosity report today is good news. We got word this week that the second PPP loan we got from the federal government to pay our staff during the pandemic has been approved and paid off. We're on our own from now on, but I think we can make it from here. Now we're asking for your donations for the upcoming annual auction, and we'll be on the path of things coming back to normal. Watch for announcements and instructions for donating. And we need everybody on board as we head toward our new normal, whatever we make happen. There is still caution and danger ahead, but we know how to do this. We know how to survive in the face of adversity, and we know that together we can do anything. Dan asked me to comment on his book. When he told me about his book, I told him I had experienced over many years what I saw as a shift from Unitarianism as a rational-only religion to Unitarian Universalism as a faith that included both reason and emotion. It might have started with the merger, but I don't know. I think Universalism has sometimes had more of an emotional spark in it, although there were the Transcendentalists, led by Unitarian minister Ralph Waldo Emerson, who thought we might learn who we are by being more a part of nature. Neither of our historical denominations has had a lock on spiritual feelings or rational argument. The emphasis on scientific reasoning caught on big with the Unitarians, however. That was the standard on which they could rely to prove their point, whether it was religious humanism or agnostic realism. When I came into the ministry in the mid-'80s, sermons then were prized for being intellectual. Surveys of congregations often showed members agreeing that they came to church mostly for the intellectual experience. There was a joke going on around about Unitarians that they knew they'd heard a good sermon when they didn't understand it. But gradually over the years, I saw a change. I saw people coming into the faith seeking spiritual experiences, seeking emotional release. Now, I'm not a historian. I haven't researched this. I'm going partly on my own reasoning and partly on my gut feeling, a healthy combination of both. I think that there were several reasons for this shift in expectations expressed and promises given. One part was an influx of young parents who had not been raised in a church setting, who were seeking an alternative to the church stories their children were being told by their peers. They wanted answers that would fill an emotional need in their children, as well as giving them a basis for thinking rationally for themselves. But another influence was the sudden influx of women into our ministry at that time. In 1982, when I entered seminary, there was a lot of talk about the fact that the class had 7 women and 6 men. The first time there had been more women in a single class than men. 3 years later, when I went to the Pacific Northwest for my internship, there was only 1 part-time woman minister in the whole district. And when I returned the following year as a minister, there were 9 of us, including parish ministers, community ministers, and seminary students. And one of the first things our male counterparts noticed in our preaching was that we told more stories, often personal stories, emotional stories, to illustrate our rational claims. I came across this reading recently that would never have been written while I was in seminary. I think it says more about today's expectations of our faith. It's called Grounded Someplace Deeper and was written by Mark Ward. Reason is an important tool, sure, an essential arbiter of truth claims about the world. But religion is grounded someplace deeper, where we experience the joy of living and are connected intimately with all that is. Religion is an entirely human experience, but one that we get in touch with using some pathway other than intellectual argument. In religion, we seek to address not just what is, but also what we hope for and what we dedicate ourselves to. We rely on it to navigate the shoals of love and grief, compassion and estrangement, gratitude and disappointment, and mystery and wonder. Religion deserves reverence. It requires a vocabulary and a theology. This theology demands no intervention of unearthly forces, but invites us to open ourselves to different ways of living and learning. It considers the human a niche in the vast intertwined plenitude of being. And just what is our niche? We are fragile, fallible sorts for whom just being is a blessing and love a pole star. I think we need both. Dan, will you tell us more about your findings?
The split between reason and emotion has had bad effects on our politics. Sometimes the voters have to decide between one candidate who expresses support for policies that will make their lives better, but comes across as cold and caring, and another candidate who is not as good on policy, but comes across as warm and caring. In that case, the candidate with the appearance of warmth usually wins. A psychologist at Emory University in Atlanta, Drew Weston, wrote a book in 2007 called The Political Brain, where he argued that Al Gore and John Kerry had both narrowly lost their presidential elections because their campaigns relied on dry facts and didn't connect emotionally with voters. You would probably say the same now about Hillary Clinton. Here is what Weston said. Democratic strategists for the last 3 decades have clung tenaciously to the dispassionate view of the mind and to the campaign strategy that logically follows from it, namely one that focuses on facts, figures, policy statements, costs, and benefits, and appeals to intellect and expertise. They do so because of an irrational emotional commitment to rationality, one that renders them, ironically, impervious to scientific evidence on how the political mind and brain work. A progressive rabbi and magazine editor, Michael Lerner, wrote a book called The Left Hand of God, in which he explored the appeal of the religious right. He found that the religious and political left were losing many Americans because of the same bias toward intellect and reason that Annie mentioned. He argued that the right was appealing to people who felt their psychological needs for meaning and personal worth were ignored by those on the left. Here is how Lerner described the crisis of meaning in our country. We live in a world in which technocratic rationality has replaced an awareness of spirit, flattening the way we experience nature and each other. In the United States, this process has reached its fullest development in the form of a bottom-line mentality that judges every activity, every institution, every social practice as rational, productive, or efficient, only to the extent that produces money or power. This way of organizing our society promotes selfishness, materialism, and disconnection. Human relationships become increasingly instrumental, utilitarian, and manipulative as people learn to see each other through the frame of how can other people be of use to me to serve my needs. Of course, we still need rationality in politics and in science and technology. And as good UUs, we need to search for truth based on evidence. But our rationality needs to fit into a framework of values that appeal to us emotionally. So our next hymn leads us back to the home of our soul. That is hymn number 1011 in the Teal Book, Return Again.
Return again, return again, return to the home of your soul. Return to who you are, return to what you are, return to where you are, born and reborn again. Return again, return again, return to the home of your soul.
Every Sunday, we tell the stories that live in this community, the communion of names and milestones. Today, I probably am speaking to some of the more long-term members who might remember Bob and, I'm sorry, I forgot his wife's name, but Bob Rake. And I got word recently, they used to be members here and they've now joined West Side. Her name is Debbie, I'm sorry. John and Debbie Rake. John fell a couple of days ago and hit his head and caused damage in his brain. He died yesterday. His family was around him. I think his son was not there because that family had had COVID recently and he couldn't be with them. I hope that we can keep them in our minds, whether you knew them or not. They are good friends of this church and friends of Unitarian Universalism. There are many stories that live in this community, stories that are told, some stories that are told only to individuals, and some stories that are kept locked in our hearts. But they are all shared in some way by this community because of our interrelationship with one another. Let us take a moment to share a silence, to meditate on the stories that live in this community, to think about your life in relationship to those in this beloved community. And then we will have a moment of meditation music.
My second question is, can we envision a future where we use advanced technology for our benefit, but technology doesn't rule our lives? Can we balance the growth of technology with a growth in the human spirit? My response to that is we all spend so much time wrestling with rapidly changing technology, which often takes time and energy away from human context. Many people are resigned to a future where artificial intelligence will take over our lives and make major decisions for us. But when we get cynical about machines taking over, we miss a great opportunity. Neuroscience, the study of the brain, and experimental psychology have advanced far enough that for the first time in history, we can use science to help move global society in the direction of more cooperation with one another and with nature. The great cultural historian Riane Eisler, who recently celebrated her 90th birthday and is still going strong, has written several books about how to build our institutions on the basis of partnership rather than domination. In her book, The Power of Partnership, Eisler notes that partnership needs to be enhanced in all relationships, starting with our relationship with ourselves. I've saved the science for the end of this service. There's more scientific detail in the second and third chapters of my book, but the take-home lesson of those chapters is that science argues for partnership, not opposition, between emotion and cognition. Out of everything we process in our environment, it is well known that we pay more attention to the events and stimuli that stir positive or negative emotion than to those events that are emotionally neutral. We remember delicious food and beautiful music, and we also remember times we were threatened by attack or disease. There's an area of the brain called the amygdala, which reacts quickly to fear-inducing stimuli. But the amygdala has to be and is connected to the cognitive processing areas of the brain in order to know which stimuli to be afraid of. The amygdala has gained notice in the popular press, with some writers attributing conspiracy theories and irrational fears of immigrants to hyperactivity of that part of the brain. Yet neuroscientists have shown that our brains are built to keep our fear reactions under control. The amygdala of experimental subjects responds to emotional faces, but can become less active, measured by blood flow, when the subject's attention is directed away from the faces and toward another part of the visual environment. Our brains are roughly divided into three layers that became prominent at different stages of animal evolution, each layer building on top of the previous layer. At the base, shared with reptiles, is the part of the brain responsible for instincts, reflexes, and automatic behavior. As a branch of the ancestral reptiles evolved into mammals, parents started caring for their offspring, and the corresponding brain development generated the emotions relating to bonding. Finally, at the level of monkeys and apes, and even more in humans, the outer surface of the brain, the cerebral cortex, ballooned out and encoded the abilities for complex information processing. This is a complex system that, as we know, doesn't always work perfectly. Sometimes instinct, emotion, and reason are at war with each other. But the capacity for their working together well is also present. There's a part of the frontal lobes called the orbital frontal cortex that seems to coordinate inputs from the three layers of the brain. Patients who have damage to the orbital frontal cortex make bad decisions. Some of them are impulsive and use profanity in inappropriate situations. Others obsess endlessly over minor decisions like what restaurant to eat at. But the more we know about how our brains work, the better we can be at using the differential parts to our advantage. We don't need genetic engineering or replacement by artificial intelligence. Other technology can't help us. We need social engineering, policies that reward caring, starting with very young children, customs that treat all people and other living things with equal worth and dignity, and language that promotes partnership, not opposition, between the emotional and intellectual parts of ourselves. Valuing reason over emotion is a heritage of the 17th and 18th century Enlightenment and the partial triumph of science over superstition. But the Enlightenment was almost entirely a movement of straight white males. Women, people of color, and LGBTQ people could be perceived as being more emotional and less rational than white heterosexual men, therefore inferior. So if we want to overcome racism, sexism, and homophobia, we need to dump the idea that reason is superior to emotion. Instead, we need to honor both reason and emotion in ourselves and in our religious faith. The balance we seek between technology and spirit is possible, but will take the courage to buck prevailing trends. As Crosby, Stills, and Nash once said, you've got to fight the madness somehow. I am not that good at persuasion, but I'm better at connecting ideas and writing about them. So books, articles, and talks are my contribution to the struggle for a better world. I like to say I'm spurred by the profit motive. That's profit spelled P-R-O-P-H-E-T. Our closing hymn is Wondrous Love, number 18 in our gray hymnals. In Jewish tradition, the number 18 is lucky because Hebrew numerology connects it to the word chai, for life.
Is this, oh my soul, what wondrous love is this, oh my soul, what wondrous love is this that brings my heart such bliss and takes away the pain of my soul, and takes away the pain of my soul. When I was sinking down, when I was sinking down, when I was sinking down beneath my sorrow's ground, friends to me gathered round, oh my soul, friends to me gathered round, oh my soul. To love and to all friends I will sing, to love and to all friends I will sing, to love and to all friends who pain and sorrow mend, with thanks unto the end I will sing, with thanks unto the end I will sing.
Thank you, Dan. You certainly made an important point of speaking of the healing of reason and emotion. I think we understand a little bit more what each of us are all about as human beings. And I want to hold up Dan's book again so that you might remember Healing the Emotion, The Reason Emotions Split, Scarecrows, Tin Woodman, and the Wizard. We lit our chalice this morning for our faith in ourselves and in one another, our faith in both our reason and our feeling, mind, body, and spirit, all in one package. We extinguish it until we meet again, as it is merely a symbol for the fire of faith that dwells within each of us. James Morrison said, "Within each of our hearts there is a most glorious light. Go forth and let its spark help you understand what troubles both you and others. Go forth and let its light of reason be a guide in your decisions. Go forth and bring its ray of hope to those in need of help in both body and spirit, that they may find healing. Go forth and fan the flames of passion to help heal our world. Go forth and spread the warm glow of love, pushing back the darkness of the world. Go forth and share your glorious light with the world." So may it be in all our lives. Our postlude this morning is by Mitro Birken, Outro in C major.